The most important thing is to be a doer, not a talker. To learn by doing. It's not hard. Today you use your words to create a model. Start building models, not just using them, because that's going to teach them about security, accuracy, and all the things that they're already doing in their role, but how AI is going to impact it. So yeah, become a doer. Get out there.
Welcome to Threat Vector, the Palo Alto Networks podcast where we discuss pressing cybersecurity threats and resilience and uncover insights into the latest industry trends. I'm your host, David Moulton, Director of Thought Leadership for Unit 42. And today, I'm speaking with Noelle Russell, Founder and Chief AI Officer at the AI Leadership Institute, Microsoft MVP in responsible AI, and one of the most influential voices in the AI space today. Noelle is a multi-award-winning futurist and an executive AI strategist whose career spans roles at Amazon, Alexa, AWS, Microsoft, IBM, Accenture, and NPR. And now she's the author of a powerful new book, Scaling Responsible AI, From Enthusiasm to Execution, where she outlines the framework and principles that organizations can use to scale AI ethically, securely, and effectively. I downloaded the PDF copy of the book and got into it as far as I could before I said, you know what, I need to have a conversation with you about it. And today we're going to talk about AI leadership, going from prototyping into production, and then how organizations can rapidly adopt what they're doing in generative AI, and what is the tipping point, that balancing innovation with risk, speed, and responsibility. So Noelle, your book, Scaling Responsible AI, From Enthusiasm to Execution, I think it's already making waves. And I especially liked your baby tiger metaphor. And I see you've got your baby tiger with you today.
Bruiser.
I love the framing. It's both cute, but baby tigers are dangerous if mishandled. Can you tell us where that analogy came from and what you want business leaders to take away from that analogy?
Absolutely. It actually came from my journey. As you mentioned, yes, I've worked at a lot of companies. The interesting thing about my career is that I end up at these companies before they've done a thing, before they've gone into the world of Amazon Alexa, or before they've launched cognitive services at Microsoft. And so I was at Microsoft. I was hired to help the research organization productize AI. So they had 17 research models that were going to be in my purview. And I immediately thought of them like, I would use the term herding cats. And so herding cats kind of transformed into this concept of a tiger, because cats aren't that fierce. And I'm a cat owner, but they, you don't want a bunch of cats around, but they're more a nuisance than like a danger.
Right.
And so I realized I needed to change that a little bit. And so we ended up with a tiger. And that metaphor, though, has now become even more interesting over time because now we're looking at, I always will tell people when you start an AI project, you start with this like adorable, cute little model that you think, it does novel things, trite things, it's exciting, right. Everyone loves it, people want to be on the team. And then at some point, you're hoping someone will go, wow, baby tiger, like how big are you going to be? Or what are you going to eat? Or you have razor sharp teeth. Like how much do you have to eat? Where are you going to live? What happens when I don't want you anymore? Like no one asked that in baby tiger mode. And so that's how this book was created, was literally, I was like, what happens when, like it's still a baby tiger, but like nobody's asking these questions. So
what happens when it grows up?
Yes.
Right.
How do we,
how do you
avoid?
Deal with that?
Yeah, baby tigers become big tigers and big tigers eat people, right? Like, so
Yep.
Let's be careful.
Well, let's talk about balancing AI risk and reward, right? You've worked with a lot of organizations at every stage of AI maturity. What are some of the most common risks you see when organizations try to scale the AI too quickly?
Yeah, so I'd say the risks are always in three basic buckets. One, accuracy. So they don't care that much. They're not thinking that a model could really be very wrong or grow wrong over time, right? In baby tiger mode, you're like, oh my gosh, I love this model. It's doing a really good job. And the job of a generative model specifically is to give you an answer that's pretty good.
Yep.
So you get this pretty good answer and you're like, well, that's not bad. And that becomes your bar as opposed to the floor. It becomes kind of the ceiling of like, well, this is pretty good. We should keep going. And what happens on day 2, or when you get to the point where you're scaling, is all of a sudden now this model's ground truth begins to change. In the spirit of machine learning, right? Model drift begins to happen unless you're monitoring it. In research, that's the whole job, is to build a hypothesis, test it, monitor it, repeat. When you move research into production, those people don't know to do that. So accuracy is huge. The second one is fairness. It's just making sure your models, not only do they not lie, but how do they maybe even not hurt the people we're trying to help, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm a financial company, I want to make sure that I'm not accidentally leveraging a data set that's going to tell my model to disenfranchise women over men, or zip codes, one zip code over another.
Of course.
And then the final one, which is right in your wheelhouse, is defense and security.
Yeah.
It started off in kind of military domain, but now it's really much more in just general, let's make sure that this model does not, it's going to increase your attack surfaces. But as it increases it, let's not exponentially grow the threat to your organization with that. And that means you have to have people that care about all 3 of these things, and they're not always the same person. As a matter of fact, they're almost never the same person. The people that care about accuracy, they're the guys that plan their vacations on an Excel spreadsheet. And then, there's a whole wonderful area in the business that cares about belonging and inclusion. So now there's a space for them to make sure models are fair and just. And then, of course, we have an entire security organization that now should definitely be included in these AI journeys.
So accuracy, fairness, and security. And that early stage, making sure that you've found the Venn diagram or the balance between those things.
That's right.
And or remember to invite everyone in.
That's right.
While you're in that early stage mode. So that's something you've seen over and over. Let's talk about the security piece. How can CISOs or maybe the risk officers evaluate when an AI use case is ready for that deployment, that production that you're talking about?
Well, it's kind of like that, the whole baby tiger analysis, right? How do you ask? The number one thing you want to ask is, what's the worst thing this thing can do to somebody? And a good data scientist will not have thought about that typically, because they're very narrowly focused on the hypothesis and the result of that hypothesis being positive. There's no value in spending research energy investigating the worst thing that could happen. But I always say to people, you're one acquisition away from the Death Star. You need to make sure that building these things securely, safely, responsibly, that it's woven into the fabric of what you do. You can't sprinkle it in at the end or have a checklist that says, make sure you're, safe and secure. It has to be woven in so that if somebody, acquires that technology, it can't be plucked out. I often will say a raisin in a bun or a chocolate chip in a muffin. It has to be more like water in a wave.
Okay, so it's part of the DNA. It's part of the sort of the ethos of building it, as opposed to something that's bolted on at the very end.
Right.
I think I've heard that story in security before. So you've got this secure AI framework, and it helps organizations align AI with security and compliance. What's security's biggest blind spot in those AI deployments?
It's probably a similar blind spot to what most executive leaders in the security space face right now, which is alignment, right? Right now, when I go into an AI organization, there's one of 2 things might have happened. One, the technology team, the data scientists, have driven the development of the thing, whatever it is, some problem that they uniquely want to solve, or the business has driven it, and it's driven by productivity or operational excellence or profit. In neither of those 2 cases are they inviting security or legal to the conversation. And when I started building these systems, I was at Accenture, and I helped build a generative AI practice from nothing to about $300 million a year in 9 months. So it was a rocket ship, and this was, of course, the golden age of November 2022 to September 23. So this is when nobody knew what was going on, but if you did, and I was a MVP at Microsoft, so I got a chance to play with GitHub Copilot before it became GitHub Copilot. So I knew what it could do. So I would go into these clients and be like, no, you should do this right now. It's 2023. I know nobody knows this yet, and everyone's still learning, but this is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that drove, I think the executives really will struggle with this, how do you get in the room? And that's what I do now, is I do a lot of executive education where I just tell the executives, it starts with legal, security, DevSecOps. Those people need to be there first. Number one, because this technology is going to sit in an infrastructure you've already created. You're not building, in most cases, you're a new rack. to stick this model in, right? It's going to go in your already secured cloud architecture. And I will tell people AI is as secured as you are. The danger, of course, is that most companies aren't that secure.
We've noticed that as well.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about those blind spots, maybe it's something around AI governance that could help out. Do you recommend integrating an AI governance practice with the cybersecurity programs?
Absolutely. I mean, my hope is, and I know that this is not true. So fun fact, when I go into an organization and I build out a solution with them, I will get them to pre-approve let's say I'm going to generate, a 25% increase in ROI for the investment they made in the project.
Yeah.
I will tell them to take half of that and dedicate it to cybersecurity because it's money they haven't made yet or, profit that they don't have. They haven't spent it yet. So I'm like, for every net new dollar, 20, and I would say 50 or 75% if I could, but 25%, I've been able to sell that to executives to pre-allocate benefit from an AI project. And the reason I say that is because that is one of the biggest challenges. The good news, though, is that you do already have some governance structures in most organizations. Yep. Data governance is ultimately AI governance. They are the same thing. It is an evolution of the same process. So start with your your data governance team and expand their scope to now include AI systems. The challenge, of course, is that data, it's not clear because you don't own the data. But there are tools, so I teach a lot of my clients about the tools that are available, open source tools for measuring accuracy, all the things we talked about, accuracy, security, fairness. There's an organization, Stanford, Human-Centered AI. They created a tool called HELM, the Holistic Evaluation of Language Models.
Okay.
And this is a tool that anyone can use. It's not technical. But every model you pick, every baby tiger you pick, I go into companies and there's little AIs running all over the place, shadow IT. And I'm like, so when you pick that model, did you know that it had a propensity to lie? There are models that will lie more than others. Did you make that intentional choice? And they're like, I didn't even know that they had metrics for that.
Yeah.
So baselining is not a new concept to the people on the technology side of the organization, security professionals, developers. It is very new to the business that's now driving these technology changes.
Yeah. No, you were talking about the idea, that propensity to lie, and I think that's a more accurate way to put it. But the folks at Carnegie Mellon were presenting a couple months ago, and one of the things they found in their research was that the models were between 40 and 70% of the time hallucinating, which is a great term for lying.
Yeah.
But they did it with such confidence, or these models did it with such confidence that if you weren't an expert in what that answer was, you could be quickly conned into believing that this machine had told you something that was accurate. They also found that these same models wanted to please. They had an intended, let's get an outcome that you're happy with, right? And if they could lie to you, because they couldn't get the answer, or it could lie to you, I shouldn't personify this, and get past, then that was success. And I think that is a really...
Turing test, but in reverse.
Yeah.
The machine is trying to get you to say, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good. And that's a moment where you're going, what other portion of my life, outside of IT, outside of technology, just find it where you go, if I was lied to 40 to 70% of the time, I would consider that great. I can't come up with it, Noelle, right?
Yeah.
That's not for me.
And I think it's interesting because in that study, what they ended up doing was asking the model, why did you lie? Right? Why did you make that up? And it would say, this is how they came to that assessment. It would say, because I didn't want to hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
What do you mean hurt my feelings? How are you quantifying hurting my feelings?
Yeah.
I'm afraid I didn't want to embarrass you, or I wanted to make you look good. These are the answers coming from a pre-trained model. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so these are the things and that's why I always say, it's about the questions you ask.
Right. Yeah. And to take it to, a human factor, if I had somebody on my team or that I was working with that admitted to me that they did this lie, right? I couldn't trust them anymore.
Right.
And it would be one of those moments of we should part ways.
Yep.
Right. And yet you're like, okay.
And maybe 3 strikes you're out, but we're talking 40 to 70%.
That's too much. That's too much. Maybe if you were talking about I made egg salad sandwiches and then you were like, they were great.
Yeah,
they were not.
Exactly. If you're trying to, but that is the philosophy though.
But I'm not asking you to do something leftover egg salad
you're like,
for
help me. Find the right customer for this problem.
That's right. Looking at what the Carnegie Mellon researchers had, I walked about walked out and they're like, how do you use AI to be smarter or a smarter user of AI? And generally it was like, very, very cautious and look up every single thing it tells you and verify it. And not just that it put a link that said this, because sometimes the link was the lie.
And it will manufacture a link and host it on its own server.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. It was just awful.
It's not good.
So
it's not good.
It has given me that moment where I'm going like, oh.
Yeah. But man. I will say, we're talking kind of about the big AI in the sky. And these are public models, right? So this is true for public models. This is not true when you take a model and you host it inside your organization, inside your firewall. You control through a retrieval augmented generation architecture. You control the data set that it uses. Like all of these things, I don't want to give the impression that all AI is this way. Like it is if you go to ChatGPT or Claude on the internet, if you look into a URL browser and you see a link that you don't own, then these are all the risks that you present yourself with.
Yep.
The sad thing is that most employees in the company, that's exactly what they're doing, is that they get a problem and they're like, we just go out to ChatGPT on my phone. And that's the worst place to do it because on your phone, you have no idea what the domain is.
Right. It's through the app.
So it's complete.
It's obscured entirely.
It gives you a sense of security when it's not secure at all.
Yeah, and the Carnegie Mellon researchers were looking at the public
yes, of course.
AIs and looking for that range because that's the most accessible. That's the one that you wake up and you say, I'm going to be an AI pro today. And,
that's the tool
not even a few
use.
dollars later, you're using it. If you want to throw a few dollars at it so that it keeps going, you can.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the human element of responsible AI. You emphasize that people, not just the technology, are the key to responsible AI. What's the role of a security culture in helping AI succeed at scale?
So in this case, we kind of look at that weaving. I like that you said the DNA. I haven't used that analogy in a while, but it is like it has to be part of the DNA. It has to be woven into the fabric of these projects. So now all of a sudden, which is why most of the time, the technology part is probably 25% of what I do when I go to an organization, help them build a solution or deploy a solution. The tech is usually not the hard part. The hard part is, how do you get a team of people that are going to care about all the things that we've shared, that are going to care about accuracy and fairness and security? And how do you get them into that project early enough to ensure that you've built it into the model's behavior, not just bundled it on? That's why governance is required, but it's not enough because you can just change your governance policies or worse, get acquired by a company that completely dismantles your governance process. Mm-hmm. Then what are you going to do? So it needs to be built in, and that's the beauty of having LLMs as part of your infrastructure. So I'll encourage, if we expand our mind and think about how do we use an LLM to actually be the security auditor in these systems and embed it into the deployed feature. So now when you get that feature, an LLM's built in to say, oh, no, these are the rules by which I'm abided.
Yeah.
And there's a framework called the AI safety system, and Microsoft and Amazon both use it. I think Microsoft's the only one that's kind of called it out that this is what they do intentionally. But that safety system is like 4 layers. And it starts with the human AI experience, which is like, that's when you involve security, legal, compliance, everyone's in the room, plus the line of business owners, plus the engineers. And you're like, what are we trying to do? And this is when you define delegation. What's the AI going to do? What are the humans going to do?
Okay.
This is like the Skynet moment, right? When you decide, if you want to, can you give everything to the AI? You could. It'll hurt you, baby tiger, right? But most organizations are like, no, there's stuff I want to keep. And usually security is one of those things. Accuracy is one. Fairness is one. So there are certain things. But once that human AI experience is defined, that's not a technical problem. That's like a designer problem. So you have these user experience designers designing how AI will be integrated into a workflow or a process. The next thing is the system prompt, is realizing with every machine you deploy, you have the ability to control the way it operates. Most people, when they think prompt engineering, they're thinking the prompts they use to ask their questions. But this is the prompt that's used to tell the bot how to answer the questions.
Okay.
And that's completely controlled. And most context windows for that, it's like 375,000 characters. It's a lot of space for you to, and I go in, that's the first thing I do in an executive briefing when they're like, yeah, we're using AI. I'm like, great, let's take a look at one. And I go into the configuration of the system prompt and it's like, you are a bot that does blah. That's it. Like and I'm pretty sure it's a default setting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not uncommon to many of these security things. You walk in, you're like, we wrote a book on this. There's a document on this. Like, it's well documented, but people just won't do it. Many reasons, time, resources. But now you can build an LLM that will infuse it into the life of your systems and feature releases. Like, there's no excuses now. And then just quickly, the last two are less controlled. One, model selection. So we talked about Helm, right? Picking the right model for the right task. And then the last one is infrastructure, which again, we're getting deeper and deeper. So if you're not building a model, you won't get to choose the infrastructure it runs on, but you should know, like, are you running on Amazon? Are you running on Microsoft? Are you running on Google? Are you running on hardware in your basement? Are you good at that? Have you ever built a NIC card? Like, nobody, asks these questions.
Yeah, how far down the stack do you want to go?
Yeah.
But you should know.
But you should know, like, or at least they should be transparent about it. Like, even if they have what are called system cards. So I was just speaking with the CISO at Anthropic and Meta at the event here, and they both were like, we have system cards, and they monitor how many people read them. And it's like less than 1% of people who use their systems go to that page and download their system cards. Not because they didn't publish it, not because they didn't say, we're responsible, here you go, explainability. People aren't even asking the question, which I think is a big challenge.
Well, before we started recording, we talked about this idea of curiosity.
Yes.
And perhaps one of the things we need in the culture in and around AI is more curiosity.
Yep.
Where is this coming from? How is it governed?
Yes.
What's going on with it? How did you get there? Do I believe you? Who else is involved?
Right.
Why aren't they involved?
Literally.
Yeah.
Yes.
So going back to that culture idea, how can you train employees to spot and then escalate the potential ethical or security issues in AI systems?
Yeah, this is probably my favorite. So I do it in two different ways. One is we do what are called break your bot challenges. So we have everyone in the team, and this goes from the boardroom to the whiteboard to the keyboard. Everybody in the company goes through a process where they build an AI system end to end. It takes less than 4 hours. I've done it in an hour. And the job is to build an AI system, like a chatbot, but a custom GPT, where you're providing the instructions and then you build it, you feel pretty good about it, and you hand it to your friend, and their job is to break your bot. Basically, red team, right? Like, just beat it up, right? Like, hammer it. And the good news is at that time, none of this requires code. They're just using their words, clarity of thought, to define a system that is now completely autonomous, like completely functional. So they deploy it. This person tries to break it by saying, hey, help me with my taxes, even though it's supposed to help with Salesforce data. So they try to identify vulnerabilities. That alone, just educating people on, if you build a machine, you own the truth, you own the answers, you own desirable conversations, undesirable conversations. All of that is up to the person deploying the machine to define. And if you don't define it, that's where hallucination comes in. In a lack of definition, it's gonna make it up. That's the difference between where we were 10 years ago when we created these declarative systems. These systems, when you asked it a question it didn't understand, it would just fail.
Yeah.
Be like, I don't know. And that was kind of better from a security perspective.
Right.
Right? Like, I'd prefer that.
You know when it broke.
Yes.
And you didn't have to worry about 40 to 70% of the time you're going to get something that the sycophants wanted to tell you so that you felt better about yourself. Right?
Like the Chevron, or I don't know, it wasn't Chevron. It was like Chevrolet, maybe it was GM, I don't know. But you can Google it and find out that they ended up deploying a bot too early, baby tiger mode, and they ended up selling a car for $1 on the internet.
I do remember.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Like, that was a huge press cycle because people were like, wait, what? I want a car for $1.
Right.
And that's all it takes. Is like, somebody says it and they put it on Reddit and it goes like, before you've had a chance to even fix it.
Yep.
And these are all things, if you have someone in the room that's testing it. That's why, so red teaming becomes this whole new concept in the world of AI. I don't know if we're going to talk about it, so I don't want to steal my own thunder, but red teaming becomes this whole new concept because it's not just about like vulnerability and attacking and adversarial attacks. It's all about like that, yes, and benign attacks. How is someone going to accidentally do something to the system? And the only way to solve for that is like this symphony of talent you're going to need in the room to go, well, as a mom, I'd probably say this, or as a cat owner, I'd say this, or as a person who never graduated from high school, I'd say this.
Right.
Like, the more people you have, but they're not going in and saying, how can I get something from you? How can I do something nefarious? It's just literally like,
how would I use this? And then by having enough different points of view, experiences, you start to patch against the bias
Yes.
or the blindness that you carry in if you're the person who's making it or you've spent a lot of time with it.
Yep.
And or you just always approach problem solving in a particular way. You
Yes.
plan your vacations with a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I laughed because there are times when that's what I have done. And I was like, oh no.
But
I
feel seen.
Yeah, I just was like, I need it all written down. I can see where things are at and it's very clear. But then I think other people maybe don't do that. But back to
but
this,
you need at least one of those people on the team.
Absolutely, yes.
Somebody's got to be very detail focused and oriented.
So let's talk about some of the regulatory sides, right? Like being ready for regulation with some of the global regulations that are coming out. And I'm thinking about like the EU AI Act, right? Maybe some of the U.S. executive orders. I think these are a moving target right now. How can CISOs prepare their organizations for the regulatory environment that's coming up in and around AI compliance?
Yeah, so my biggest advice is that they don't have to go it alone. The Department of Energy, the Department of State, they've released enterprise AI architecture documents that are very good and most importantly, acquired the brightest minds across the biggest companies. Like $40 million was invested to create these documents for the federal government, in the previous administration, granted, but they are public documents. So at least as a model of like what questions to ask, it's a great format. So Department of State, Department of Energy, but then also thinking state and local governments. So the state of Arizona, Maricopa County is a county in Arizona, one of the largest counties. They also released an enterprise AI. Like it's not an act; it was a guiding principle. But they hired big companies, Accenture, PwC, McKinsey, to help them build this document, and then they made it. Basically, it's not open source, but it's public data, so you can go out and use that. So that's what I always encourage: is don't start from scratch. Like take a model I really think a federal model is like the lowest possible denominator because they're going to do the least amount of money for, do the least amount of work for the least amount of money.
But it gives you a floor.
At least, yes. And most people don't do that.
Once you get to the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, not below the floor.
Right.
Don't be in the basement.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And when you read that document, you're going to be like, holy mama, we don't have any of that. We don't have any of that. Yeah.
Thanks for keeping it threat vector safe. So today there are financial audits that are very common with large public companies. Do you see a future where there are going to be AI audits at that same level because it's so important?
Absolutely. I think it's happening now. So in the financial space, as well as in the healthcare space, the good news is that we are now building technology that was born in research, and that research continues to happen. What's different is that those research organizations used to be and continue to be at like MIT and Stanford. Now, companies like OpenAI, DeepMind at Google, Amazon Research, like their research organizations are productized. So now we're seeing that same benefit happen inside companies, but it is research. Like someone has to kind of push the envelope of what's possible without making it a product feature, like just testing, hypothesis testing, asking questions. That's what academic people do. Like that's what PhDs.
Right.
And so I was just at MIT last week and I saw all these amazing AI PhD programs. And I'm a little worried because no one's productizing that, but these are like healthcare, finance. They are using AI to audit AI. And I remember someone telling me like, you can't use AI. In the world where we think it's one big AI in the sky, you wouldn't want the one big, the right hand to know what the left hand is doing or whatever that phrase is. But that's not what happens. Like when you build a model, it's completely different. It's like Bob and Jeff.
Right. It's not the student grading their own homework.
Right, at all.
It can be the TA grading the homework of the students
or it could be like
or another faculty
member. A Nobel
member.
Prize winner actually grading a student, like that works all the time without fail, never gets tired.
Right.
It does get wrong because you might not be caring for the accuracy or security part of it. But these models, like right now, for example, Microsoft just released a brand new agent called the The red teaming, AI red teaming agent. Okay. And it came out of 3 years of research and productization of red team, like humans doing the red teaming. And then they fine-tuned a model and now they're selling it as a product. So look at your organization. What do you do enough as humans that you can right now just make an intention, we're gonna capture enough data to train a model to augment this team, not replace it. but make that team's job more effective. And I think there's so much nonsense that we have to do, like in security and documentation and metadata management and all of that, that like building models to help us with that is going, I mean, if you don't do it, you'll be behind. Like your competitors will eat your lunch.
So earlier you talked about this idea that AI security is data security. And I want to talk about data protection in this age of generative AI. The generative models, they often include this like large-scale data ingestion. What are the privacy and the security implications that leaders often overlook?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that a leader, when looking at a model, they're looking at it through the lens of like a public AI model. The data piece is going to be, when you start using these models, you're going to use it privately. It'll be inside your walled garden, right? Inside your VPN. So once you're inside your VPN, it's very different. You now own that data. The problem they'll then run into is that the data itself is conflicting. So they'll have data from 20 years ago, meeting data from today, and it will actually confuse the models. So models will be like, but you said, or worse, they will use the word like, I was working with the state of New York, and they used the word policy. And we created a model for the entire state of New York, for like the whole organization. When we used policy, it was not possible to differentiate between residential policy and pet owning policy. And so as a result of that, we got really weird behavior, really weird suggestions about pet owning and human like habitation. You don't want that, by the way.
Right.
But that just gave us the ability to think about how we might be able to, like, a leader needs to think, how do I make sure that I'm following guidance that I'm already using in the rest of my organization? It's kind of like habits. Who's that guy? John something, he wrote like Atomic Habits. Like take something you're already doing really well in your organization and take the new thing and attach it to that. So like if you're already got a security policy, like attach the new AI policy to that so that the habit is created that you ask the same question. They're different questions, but the process is the hard part.
Okay.
Change management, I think, is going to be much more harmful to organizations than the tech itself.
So, Noelle, thank you so much.
It was super fun.
For coming on and talking to me. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
If you like what you heard today, please subscribe wherever you listen and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Those reviews really do help me understand what you want to hear about. And if you want to reach out to me directly, email me at the show at threatvector@paloaltonetworks.com. I want to thank our executive producer, Michael Heller, our content and production teams, which include Kenny Miller, Joe Betticourt, and Virginia Tran. Elliot Peltzman edits the show and mixes our audio. We'll be back next week. Until then, stay secure, stay vigilant. Goodbye for now.